Hey guys, hopefully everybody's having a good day. Gonna try and finish up the book today. It's gonna be a little bit longer of a story or a time, but we'll get it finished today and find out what happens. Once Omri had decided, every day that passed was important because it was one day nearer to the last. Patrick was as sad as he was, but he didn't argue against Omri's decision. It's the only way, really, Patrick said. After that, he didn't talk about it anymore. He just tried to be at Omri's house as much as possible. He couldn't do things with Boone much, of course, even though in a day or two Boone was sitting up in the longhouse and demanding to talk to his horse, which was brought to the entrance for the purpose, and whinnying and whining for all sorts of special food and drink. I can't be expected to get my strength back if you didn't give me a little of the hard stuff, he nagged. Even pretended to have a relapse. Omri pinched a nose dropper of whiskey from his parents' drinks in the cupboard and squeezed a large drop down Boone's throat before the Indian girl, whose name was Bright Stars, a reference to her shining eyes, Omri supposed, has succeeded in conveying the fact that Boone was perfectly all right and that his faint was faked. Still, after he had his drink, Boone seemed much better than that Omri, and Patrick decided it wouldn't do him any harm. He's used to it, after all. And thereafter, Boone got a liquor ration 3 times a day and did very well on it. He'll be ready to go back tomorrow, said Omri on the 4th day, when Boone, having had a leg up from Little Bear, managed to ride his horse around the seed box at a steady walk. They'll probably look after him better than we can in his own time. Thought struck him, and he fished out of his pocket the drawing Boone had done. Boone, is this your hometown? Sure is. Omri studied it closely under the magnifying glass. Away up the street, he saw a little sign reading, Doctor. Is he a good doctor? About as good as any out west, I reckon. Fish a bullet out of a man's arm or cut his foot off for a snake bite as neat as can be. I seen him bring a pal of mine back from the dead near enough by putting a hot coal in his belly button. That's pretty funny, I admit. He never operates till a man's dead drunk enough, and he don't charge any extra for the liquor either. Omri and Patrick looked at each other. You'd feel that you were in good hands with this doctor looking after you? Patrick asked worriedly. I sure would. Anyhow, don't need no sawbones now. My wound's healing up. As long as I get my whiskey, I'll be as good as new. Boone bore not the slightest ill will toward Little Bear for having shot him. That's in an Indian's nature. Poor simple creatures seed no more help. Again, reading some of Boone the way they have it written, I'm going to try starting over. That there's in it Indian's nature. Poor simple critter seed no more help himself than I can keep away from. Could no more help himself than I can keep away from my horse and my bottle. The night before Omri had decided to send them back, they held a brotherhood ceremony. I wish we could ask our brothers, said Patrick to Omri at school that day. Suppose we tell them one day about this, they'll never believe us. Sending them back, said Omri slowly, doesn't mean the magic won't work anymore. I'm going to put the key away somewhere so I won't be tempted, but it will always be there. Patrick looked at him wonderingly. I never thought of that, he said slowly. So there'd be nothing to stop us months or even years from now from bringing Boone and Little Bear back again to visit. I don't know, said Omri. Maybe their time is different from ours. It would be awful if they were old or, but he couldn't say, dead. Both Boone and Little Bear came from such dangerous times. Omri shivered and changed the subject. As for our brothers coming, he said, all I want of my brothers is to keep that rat in its cage. The rat had been caught by Omri after a long, patient wait with cheese and a fishing net, and Omri threatened Gillen with the worst fate imaginable if it got away again. The 2 boys went to Yap's after school and bought a feast of food for the ceremony. Salted nuts, chips, and chocolate. Omri bought a quarter pound of the best meat at the butcher's for tiny hamburgers. A teaspoon would have been enough, but the butcher wasn't interested in that. They got bread, biscuits, cake, and soda from Omri's mother, and Omri sneaked another dropper full of the hard stuff without which Boone would certainly not consider it a festive occasion at all. Omri was rather surprised Boone had agreed to be a brother to a stinking Indian. They put that in quotes, and that's just, they did that to show how Boone talks at all. But Boone actually seemed to rather like the idea. "'Tain't just anyone gets to be the brother with an Indian chief, you know," he said proudly. As he rolled up his sleeve and Bright Stars carefully swabbed his arm with soap and water, as he rolled up his sleeve and Bright Stars carefully swabbed his arm with soap and water, but when he saw Little Bear sharpening his knife on a pebble, he turned pale. "Oh, heck, it'll hurt," he muttered, but Patrick told him not to be a coward. "It's only a little stick. It's nothing at all." "Easy for you," retorted Boone. "I ain't so sure this is a nice idea after all." He cheered up when he saw the campfire being kindled and smelled the meat Bright Stars was cooking on the pointed stick. And when Omri gave him a good swig from the dropper, he swaggered up to Little Bear and offered his arm with drunken flourish. "Chop away, brother," he said loudly. Little Bear went through the whole routine first, cleaning himself, offering up loud chanting prayers to the spirits, and performing a marvelous stomping dance around the fire. Then he nicked his own wrist with the point of the knife. The blood welled up, and Boone took one look and burst into tears. "I don't want to change my mind," he bawled, but it was too late for that. Little Bear seized his arm, and before Boone knew what was happening, the deed was done. Bright Stars bound their wrists together with a strip of hide torn from the hem of her red dress. Boone looked at it in a bemused way. "Gee whiz, we done it. I'm part Indian. Well, I guess I can't say nothing against them in the future." Then the two brothers, again in quotes, sat on the ground, and Bright Stars served them cooked meat and all the rest of the feast. Patrick and Omri offered their congratulations and started in on their own food. They kept the campfire going with tiny bits of broken matchsticks and a bit of coal dust Omri had collected from the outside bunker, which, when sprinkled on the flame, made it spit minute sparks. Looking at it, the three little figures around it, the boys gradually lost their sense of size altogether. "I feel as if I were the same as them," murmured Patrick. "Me too," said Omri. "I wish we were all the same size, and there'd be no problems." "Don't be funny. No problems with two full-grown Indians and a 6-foot crying cowboy?" "I meant if we were small, we could enter into their world, sleep in the longhouse, ride the horses." "I wouldn't mind eating one of those little hamburgers," said Omri. Bright Stars was now crouched by the fire, tending it, singing softly. One of the horses whinnied. Boone seemed to have dropped off to sleep, leaning on Little Bear's shoulder. Little Bear alone was aware of the boys watching them. He beckoned to Omri with his free hand. When Omri bent to hear him, he said, "Now." "Now? You mean go back?" "Good time. All happy. Not wait for morning." Omri looked at Patrick, and he nodded slowly. "When you go into the cupboard," Omri said, "you must hold Bright Stars, or she may not go back with you. Women go back with Little Bear. Little Bear hold, not let go. And horse. Little Bear, only Iroquois with horse. But Boone must go separately. Don't drag him back into your time. Your people would kill him even if you are his new brother." Little Bear looked at Boone, asleep at his side, and their joined wrists. Then he took his knife out and cut the thong that bound them together. Patrick gently lifted Boone up. "Don't forget his hat. He'd never forgive us if we let him leave that behind." To be safe, they sat Boone on his horse. Cowboys often ride in their sleep, and he didn't stir as Little Bear led him down the ramp, across the table, and up another ramp. Omri stood against the rim of the cupboard. Then Little Bear went back to the seed box. Carefully, he and Bright Stars put out the fire with earth. Little Bear took a last look at his longhouse. Then he put Bright Stars onto his horse's back and led them after Boone. They stood together in the bottom of the cupboard, and nobody spoke. Omri had his hand on the door when Patrick suddenly said, "I'm going to wake Boone up. I don't care. I've got to say goodbye to him." Hearing his name, Boone woke up by himself so suddenly he nearly fell off his horse and had to clutch the high pommel of his saddle. "What you want, kid?" he asked Patrick, whose face was close to him. "You're going home, Boone. I wanted to say goodbye." Boone stared at him, and then his face slowly crumpled. "I can't stand saying goodbye," he choked out as tears began to stream. He pulled a huge red grubby handkerchief from his pocket. "I just refuse to say it, that's all. I'll only bust out crying if I do." And he blew a trumpet blast from his nose. Omri and Little Bear were staring at each other. Something else was needed, some special farewell. It was Little Bear who thought of it. "Omri give hand." Omri put his hand forward. The horse braced his legs, but Little Bear held him steadily. Little Bear took hold of Omri's finger, drew his knife, and pricked in the soft part. A drop of blood appeared. Then Little Bear solemnly pressed his own right wrist against the place and held it there. "Brother," he said, looking up at Omri with his fierce black eyes for the last time. Omri withdrew his hand. Little Bear jumped onto the back of his horse behind Bright Stars, holding her around the waist so that she, and the horse made one unit that could not be separated by whatever kind of unearthly journey they had to make through the unknown regions of time, space, and proportion. Little Bear raised his arm in the Indian salute. Omri put his hand on the door. He nearly couldn't do it. He had to set his teeth. Boone and his horse stood patiently, but the Indian's horse started to prance and sidle. It put its head up and gave a long, challenging neigh. "Now!" cried Little Bear. Omri drew a breath, closed the door, and turned the key. He and Patrick stood frozen with sadness and the strangeness of it. The magic was working at this moment. Both of them silently counted to 10. Then, very slowly, Omri, whose hand had not left the key, turned it back again and swung the door open. There they were, two plastic groups, forms out of lines, shells, and the real creatures they had been. Each boy lifted out his own and helplessly examined it. The life-giving details were blurred. Plastic can't show the fine beadwork, the perfection of hair and muscle, the folds of the hide, the sheen of a horse's coat, or the beauty of a girl's skin. The figures were there, but the people, their personalities, were gone. Patrick's eyes met Omri's. Both were wet. "We could just bring them back, just quick," Patrick said huskily. No, I know. They're home now." Omri put his group, the Indian, the girl, and the horse, on the shelf nearest his bed where he could see it easily. He laid the beaded belt, still real, beside it. Patrick slipped the mounted cowboy into his pocket, keeping his hands around it almost as if to keep it warm. Then Omri took the key and left the room. His mother was in the kitchen getting everyone a hot drink before bed. She took one look at Omri's face and her hands became still. "What's happened? What's wrong?" "Nothing, Mum. I want you to keep this key. I lost it. Luckily, I found it again, and you told me it was important. Better if you keep it, please." She nearly refused to, but then, looking at him, she changed her mind and took the key from him. "I'll get a chain and wear it," she said, "like I always meant to. You won't lose it, will you?" She shook her head and suddenly reached for him and hugged his face against her. He was shaking. He broke away and ran back to his room where Patrick was still standing with his hand in his pocket, gazing at the cupboard. "Come on, I'm going to put all sorts of medicines in it," Omri said loudly. "Bottles of pills and stuff Mom's finished with. We'll pretend it's a doctor's cupboard, and we can mix lots of them together." His voice petered out. Those were silly games, such as he had played before. He didn't feel the slightest interest in them now. "I'd rather go for a walk," said Patrick. "But what shall I do with the cupboard?" asked Omri desperately. "Leave it empty," said Patrick, "in case." He didn't say in case what, but he didn't have to. Just to know you could. that was enough. I want to show you one last picture that I passed on the way. That was a picture of everybody in the cupboard ready to go back to their own time. So that was the end of it, them being content with, after all that adventure, knowing that they didn't need to have anything. That was just enough. So I hope you enjoyed the story. I've enjoyed reading it again. It's been a long time since I've been able to go back through it, and hopefully somewhere down the road, if you get interested, you can read it yourself and enjoy it again another time. Take it easy, you guys. Have a good day.